Riddles in the Dark, as Atari Archive jumps back to August for a pair of Imagic games. A crushing load of games came out for the VCS in the fall of 1982, leading into the software glut that frequently, if inaccurately, gets blamed for the market crash. But it also means sometimes things get missed, such as the case with today's two games. From all indications, Riddle of the Sphinx and Firefighter both started reaching stores in August, so this is a bit of a catch-up. But that's not a big deal to me, as both of these games are rather unique. Riddle of the Sphinx is by and large the more ambitious, however. This is developer Bob Smith's own take on the more in-depth adventure-style game, seen from Atari with titles like Superman, Adventure, and Haunted House, and by Activision with September's Pitfall. Here you are an Egyptian prince who must lift a curse on the land by venturing across the desert, collecting treasures and bringing them to a pair of temples as gifts to the gods. Along the way, you have to find and use items, slake your thirst at oases, contend with bandits and nomadic traders, improve your inner strength score, and occasionally encounter a god or two. In a 2021 interview I conducted with Smith, he explained the initial idea came from his time at Atari. After finishing Video Pinball, Smith said he and several other programmers saw their workspace relocated to trailers in the parking lot due to a lack of office space in the building. He shared his with Carlo Meninsky, who was working on Battlezone at the time, but he had the idea of doing something in the vein of tabletop RPG Dungeons & Dragons. Mattel wound up securing the rights to make a D&D video game following the success of their Dungeons & Dragons computer Labyrinth board game in 1980, but at the time, to Smith's knowledge, it was open season. Developer Nick Turner served as the dungeon master, while he and a couple others played in several sessions. This led to Smith and Turner brainstorming what D&D for the VCS could look like using 8K of cartridge read-only memory, and Smith began designing what that would look like. Early into that process, however, his co-workers Dennis Coble and Rob Fulop left to form Imagic and convinced Smith to join them, so the idea was put on the back burner while he developed his first game there, Star Voyager. After completing that rather ambitious first-person space game, Smith put together a kernel, or engine, for the VCS that would allow objects to march down the screen while missile objects go in the opposite direction, similar to the one used in Carol Shaw's River Raid some months later. As for the theming, Smith was inspired by the Rosicrucian Egyptian Museum near his house in San Jose. The end result of Smith's efforts is a rather unique adventure game experience if you're used to those from Atari itself. The prince is situated at the bottom of the screen and can shuffle left and right, while moving up or down scrolls the landscape around him. The button on the left controller is used to throw rocks, which you'll use to fend off thieves and scorpions. You have an inventory at the bottom of the screen, accessed using the second controller to highlight a given object so that it is active. Certain items, such as the spade, jug, or tannis leaf, are used with the action button on the second controller. As you move along the game world, you'll encounter your aforementioned enemies, the scorpions and thieves, but also nomads who will trade with you, the gods Anubis and Isis, oases that provide water to drink, pyramids, and a phoenix, a sphinx, and temples that require offerings. The spade can be used to dig up objects, including valuable treasures. Taking a hit from an enemy will injure your prince, though you can heal by either using a tannis leaf or by waiting it out. If you go long enough without getting hurt again, you'll recover naturally. Meanwhile, if you go for too long without a drink of water, you'll get thirsty. In both cases, you'll be slowed and your own rocks won't be thrown as far until you either recover from your injuries or you have some water from an oasis or jug. The gods, meanwhile, help or hinder you. If you approach Isis from below, she may give you a full heal, a sacred gift, or both, while Anubis will slam you with wounds and a penalty to your inner strength. Hit either of them with a rock or a nomadic trader, and you lose inner strength points. The right difficulty switch and the color/black and white switch are used to check on various statistics, such as the time elapsed, your inner strength score, and your wound and thirst scores, while the left difficulty switch will adjust the game speed and how often you encounter enemies. Additionally, while some treasures are used only as offerings, others have functional utility, serving as infinite recovery items or magically speeding up your movements. This all sounds rather complicated, and Smith included 3 difficulty levels that help ease you into Riddle of the Sphinx. Game 1 starts you with a shield, which protects you from enemies, and simply tasks you with making it to Ra's temple at the end of the game with as much treasure as you can find, with no regard to which offerings you need to make. Game 2 requires you to make the correct offerings to the Sphinx and Ra to win. Game 3, marked as the ultimate challenge in the manual, takes away your shield and replaces it with a spade, and requires 2 offerings at the Phoenix, the Temple of Anubis, and the Temple of Isis, as well as 1 offering to the Sphinx. The manual includes hints from the Royal Astrologer on what offerings to make at each location, though if you don't want to decipher the clues, it's not too difficult to find a walkthrough that will just tell you what you need and where certain objects are always located. At the time, one could write into Imagic and request the solutions to the riddles, presumably in recognition that not everyone in the era of predominantly action games wanted to try and solve puzzles or brute force the solutions. Even with that in mind, it's probably worth trying to figure out the game yourself with the manual as a guide, and if you don't want spoilers, you may want to skip ahead a little bit. The first game mode really doesn't have any puzzle aspects to speak of. You just race to the end of the game world and drop your stuff off at Ra's temple. And the second difficulty level has pretty simple considerations, requiring you to solve the riddles of potentially one of the Phoenix, Isis, or Anubis' temples to successfully pass the Sphinx and reach Ra's temple. Game 3 is the meat of the experience, though. You must make 2 offerings to the Phoenix, Isis, and Anubis. The treasures from the riddle will open the pyramids as in Game 2, but if you want to actually move past those landmarks, you need to also offer a specific object to each one. As in Game 2, the Sphinx wants a specific item, but which from the pyramids is randomized. Finally, Ra requires you to offer him a specific treasure to actually win. This is found in the same location in Game 3 and requires you to do a little bit of backtracking out of the gate. Smith described Riddle of the Sphinx as a brilliant piece of work, but a niche one, estimating it sold around 750,000 units compared to the million-plus of Shaw's River Raid. But it, alongside Atlantis, was the subject of one of Imagic's contests. In this case, Imagic wanted to know how you solved the riddle and the offerings you made to the Phoenix, the temples, and to the Sphinx, but moreover, wanted your response to be sufficiently creative. The winner wound up being Charles Compton of Santa Monica, California, whose approach was to draw up a 12-foot scroll illustrated with hieroglyphs that detailed his winning journey in story format. For this, he won $1,000 and, presumably, the envy of Egyptology enthusiasts who also happened to play video games. While Smith passed away in 2023, he did wind up circling back and making his Dungeons & Dragons themed game for the VCS. Around 2016, he created a first-person dungeon crawler for the VCS with 10 floors and donated it to the National Video Game Museum, indicating that they could sell it to fundraise if they wanted to. He mentioned it was about as impressive as it sounded and something he felt he phoned in, but he nevertheless fulfilled his original idea, and that has to be worth something. Yet his original adventure game is rather special, a unique take on the genre for the VCS thanks to its theming and approach to puzzle solving. The Imagic library rights may have been in tax bill limbo since the company shuttered, but if any game from their lineup deserves another release and an expansion, maybe it's this one. Riddle of the Sphinx is a very cool concept done incredibly well given the limitations of the system. Imagic's final August release, Firefighter, is about as far removed from Riddle of the Sphinx as you can get. Coming to us from Atari veteran developer Brad Stewart, known in this series for his work on the VCS ports of Breakout and Asteroids. The game has you working as the titular firefighter, putting out a blaze and rescuing people from a burning building. In Stewart's interview with Scott Stilphen from 2001, he explained that he joined Imagic in September 1981 after failing to garner any interest within Atari for an Atari 8-bit computer synth keyboard. I also corresponded with Stewart in 2022, where he told me that Dennis Coble and Bob Smith had approached him about joining Imagic, and met with Imagic's president Bill Grubb before deciding to take the job. After thinking it over for a weekend, he went into Atari on Monday morning and informed an Atari executive that he had a meeting scheduled with that he was planning on leaving. His first day at Imagic, he recalled, was spent in court as Atari had sued him and another former employee, Mark Bradley, over potentially taking proprietary information with them, a claim the judge dismissed on the grounds that he saw no reason that they couldn't switch jobs. In the Classic Gaming Expo 2004 panel with Imagic alumni, Stewart recalled then listening to a recording of a brainstorming session the initial Imagic founders had for future games, remembering distinctly one about doing urine analysis that left him wondering what the controller would even be. In talking to Grubb, the Imagic president suggested that he create a bullfighting game, but after checking out a book on it from the library, Stewart decided it was too bloody and violent for his tastes. He then remembered a student from his high school days who was obsessed with becoming a firefighter, and decided that there were likely enough other kids like him that were into firefighting that it would be a good idea for a game. Firefighter is a pretty straightforward concept, and the game itself seems rather kid-friendly in execution. Your firefighter has a fire engine with a ladder and a hose. You can hop out of the engine and use the joystick to position your stream of water to the fire's hot spots until they're put out, though you do only have a limited supply. Rescuing the person trapped in the building requires the use of the ladder. You can adjust the ladder's position on the ground by holding down the button and using the joystick to align it and then extend it. You can then climb it by hopping onto the fire engine and going up. The game isn't necessarily concerned with the fire being put out so much as it is with rescuing the person in the building. Once he's safe, it will score you based on your time. That said, the fire will drive him further to the top of the building if it's not dealt with, requiring more time fiddling with the ladder. If the fire is out on the floor below him, the man will make his way down. Functionally, you can't lose the game because if he's driven to the roof, he'll just wait there for the fire to go out either from your efforts or on its own, and then come down accordingly. The left difficulty switch adjusts how quickly the fire will spread, though any place that has had the fire dealt with by the hose will not catch again. Games 1 through 8 adjust how many floors are on the building from 10 down to 3, while Game 9 is something of a gauntlet where you start on a 3-story building and work your way to 10 stories with the same supply of water across all of them. Pressing the button after finishing a game restarts it. His concept for the game was one of balancing resource allocation, Stewart told me. The player can't just spray water indiscriminately due to their limited supply, but also the ladder takes time to deploy. The inflection point on which action to take and when really depends on the stories of the building, he explained. He added that he did get helpful hints and advice from his coworkers during the game's development, too. Like I said, Firefighter is really geared towards children, as it is incredibly easy to win around if you have the dexterity. The fires on difficulty B take their time spreading, and you can kind of ignore them by lining up the ladder with the higher floor and just waiting for the victim there. The smaller buildings may require a bit more activity on your part, but nothing too stressful to deal with. Even Game 9, the multi-building gauntlet, isn't terribly difficult to finish with some water left over. This is not the case when the difficulty switch is set to A, as in those cases the fire spreads extremely quickly and will need some hosing down before you start messing with your ladder. If you dawdle, it will spread to the top floor before you know it, necessitating you to clear some of the floors of flame or wait it out and lose a bunch of time. That said, there's really not a lot to this game. The higher difficulty options prevent it from being a cakewalk, but the lack of a lose condition really robs it of any sort of tension. Competing on time is a welcome choice, and does add a little bit of an edge when you just need that guy to come to your window before the flames push him to another floor. One thing that must be said is that of all the Easter eggs on the VCS, Firefighters is probably the most hidden in plain sight. If you pay close enough attention to the flames, you'll see that their animation includes a frame where the initials BS appear on them, as well as a frame where the fire has a smiley face. Easy to miss, but once you know it's there, it's hard not to notice it. While Stewart had no firm sales figures for Firefighter, he told me he didn't think it compared well to the other Imagic releases. Upon completing it, Stewart started work on Sky Patrol, a graphically impressive Imagic game that never came out that had you piloting a hot air balloon. This initial concept had you racing from point A to point B as quickly as possible by adjusting your altitude to catch wind currents. But at some point, it started being retooled into a World War I themed action game, where you are trying to avoid being shot down by the German military. An incomplete prototype of this game has been online for decades. Stewart told me that had Sky Patrol been completed, he would have liked to have more resource allocation aspects included as well. He also worked on an Apple II adventure game, Sherlock Holmes in Another Bow, alongside Michael Becker and Pete Golden that put the detective in an original story. His final work with Imagic was Star Wars the arcade game on both the 2600 and Atari 8-bit/5200 platforms, though the former of which he had very limited involvement with as Bob Smith took the lead due to his longer history of 2600 development. As such, Stewart was primarily responsible for the 8-bit version. Due to the industry's struggling condition, Imagic had been contracted out by Parker Brothers, which owned the Star Wars home video game rights. When Imagic shuttered, Stewart was made an independent contractor for Parker Brothers so that he could finish writing the 8-bit version. He recalled that due to the tight time frame to deliver the final game, he hadn't really considered any enhancements, so much as just trying to get it to play as close to the coin-op as he could. Firefighter might not be Stewart's strongest work, but the novel concept and time management aspects deserve accolades. If you've got a young firefighting-obsessed kid, they'll probably be interested in checking it out. Just don't expect it to necessarily hold an adult's attention for very long. Riddle of the Sphinx might have been a niche game, but Smith's work was highly praised in reviews. In Space Gamer, Richard Edwards wrote that it was the most complicated and fascinating game on the hardware, a combination guessing game and treasure hunt, and that he appreciated its usage of the various switches in both controllers to play. His one complaint is that the hints in the manual made some of the puzzles a little too obvious. The video game update gave it 4 stars for play and 3.5 for graphics, finding that it would appeal to those interested in mysterious adventures and quests, with the setting entertaining and even educational. Reviewers in Logical Gamer gushed over it in a lengthy review. Mike Wilson wrote that he was impressed a game with so much strategy to it could work on the VCS, describing it as ideal within the limits of the platform and a change of pace from most of the other games out at the time. Alan Bechtold agreed, with his only quibbles being the graphics and the fact that you could write into Imagic for the riddle solutions. TV Gamer described it as a first-rate adventure game, and video games reviewer Phil Wiswell dubbed it one of his favorites, which required solving logic and memory puzzles over accurate shooting. Video Games Player gave it an overall rating of B, and Electronic Games awarded it a Certificate of Merit for Best Adventure Game, losing the Archie Award to Pitfall. Firefighter saw a little more muted a response compared to Riddle of the Sphinx. In video games, Perry Greenberg remarked that its visuals lived up to Imagic's reputation for peerless graphics, but that the game itself was a bit too easy, as you can simply position yourself in such a way that the flames will drive the victim to you in less time than it would take to fight the blaze. Logical Gamer's reviewers both described it as a graphically beautiful but simply too thin on the play side to recommend. TV Gamer described it as moderately challenging, but one where the novelty can wear off quickly. In the video game update, the reviewer suggested it would appeal more to younger children due to its easy gameplay and the fact that the victim is ultimately fine even if the fire is left to burn. Video Gaming Illustrated gave it a roundabout review in its write-up for US Games Towering Inferno, where it was described as ambitious but not so much fun as an exercise in methodical perseverance. And Video Games Player gave it an overall C rating. These cartridges are 2 of Imagic's last 3 retail VCS releases for 1982, with one final game in December. While the company will have several more games in 1983, the rest of the calendar year is really devoted to Intellivision cartridges, where Imagic put out 4 games that really established it as the premier third-party publisher. Their VCS lineup at this point may not be as consistently strong as Activision's, which served as their primary competition, but nothing has come across as underbaked compared to some of the other third-party titles we've seen so far this year. Next time, parasites and nuclear meltdowns.